Now, Republicans have failed to decide who their next Speaker of the House should be. After a closed-door conference today, the third most powerful position in the US government remains vacant after Kevin McCarthy's shock ousting. Here's our Washington correspondent Annalise Nielsen with this report.
Republicans in US Congress remain as divided as ever, with party members unable to come together to elect a Speaker. Members gathered for a closed-door session on Capitol Hill. So secret and apparently tense, members' phones were confiscated and put into envelopes so nothing could be recorded to be leaked. Steve Scalise came out on top, but not by enough.
Steve Scalise got 113 votes. That is a majority. But how are you going to convince the other 100 and something of a sudden just say, well, now we're all going to vote for Steve Scalise? I think Steve Scalise is a great guy, but he got 51% of the conference. So my point is this. If we're going to take this floor to the vote, or this vote to the floor, I hope you try to get everybody together and figure out how you're going to get all the others to say, okay, Steve's the guy.
Steve Scalise had a moment to celebrate.
We need to make sure we're sending a message to people all throughout the world that the House is open and doing the people's business, making sure that we're unequivocally standing in our first resolution that we pass under Speaker Steve Scalise will be to make it clear that we stand with Israel. The McCall-Meeks resolution will be our first order of business.
Unfortunately, not long after, the House managed to gavel in for just a few minutes before it became clear Scalise didn't have the numbers at all. The magic number he needs is 217, and Republicans still can't come up with that number without help from the Democrats. The House is now in recess with no other session scheduled, which means no bills can pass and the government's edging closer towards its shutdown at the end of November. Annalise Nielsen, Sky News, Washington, DC.
Let's bring in James Morrow, one-third of The Outsiders and host of the US Report on Sky News. James, where to from here? The chaos could continue. We know back in January it took Kevin McCarthy 15 rounds of votes to become Speaker. So where to from here for the House?
Yeah, well, look, Kieran, this is just a continuation of this huge own goal the Republicans made the other week by taking out Kevin McCarthy on the basis of basically, you know, what we would call in Australia internal factional infighting. And now they've got no one there. Now, Steve Scalise is an interesting guy. He was actually shot by a crazed Bernie Sanders supporter back in 2016 before that election when he and his amateur congressional baseball team were practicing in suburban Washington. He's got an interesting biography and history there. But that said, you know, now the Democrats, it is in their interest to create chaos, not give the Republicans a speaker, and then blame a subsequent shutdown in November, heading into Christmas, on the Republicans.
So in terms of the broader politics here, as we head into the presidential year as well, 2024, what is the impact on the Republicans and their frontrunner, Donald Trump?
Well, again, we've discussed this here. I mean, there's now such a wide gap between Donald Trump and then the actual kind of Republicans who are running the day-to-day legislature that I don't think it affects Trump much at all because his brand is now very much a different sort of Republican brand than the congressional Republican brand. What I think it does mean, though, is that there'll be potentially an awful lot of moderate Republicans who will be tarred with the whole brush of chaos and dysfunction. This could hurt them in November, especially if Americans split their tickets and go Trump for the presidency, but then want to balance him out with a Republican, with a Democrat, I mean.
With the Democratic administration right now, if we turn our attention to the events in the Middle East, the Biden administration moving with immediate military aid, but also moving an aircraft carrier group to the Eastern Mediterranean, a very decisive and quick show of force there. What do you make of that, James?
Well, I think this is an attempt by the Biden administration to show that they do not want this to get out of hand. You know, there's so many opportunities for miscalculation in this sort of thing and for this to become a much wider conflict, one that could involve Iran. We've already seen reports that a conflict has started in the north of Israel with Hezbollah. How or where the U.S. would intervene in this is anybody's guess, except to say it would be for Israel. But, you know, would this bring them into contact with Hezbollah, Hamas, Iranian forces? Remember, you know, the Biden administration and the Obama administration before it have done everything they could previously to increase the power of Iran. And now, of course, you know, that whirlwind is being reaped now with Hamas's behavior, because Hamas is obviously backed by Iran in Israel. And so, the foreign policy here of the Biden administration may look like it's being decisive at the moment, but it is in fact extremely confused, and an awful lot of the real horror show that we've seen here, Joe Biden said they were going to free up $6 billion from frozen assets for Iran. The administration still has not said they're going to stop that money from being transferred. I mean, they really need to make up their mind here. It's not just about the aircraft carrier, the show of force. It's about really, taking on Iran, turning it back into the pariah nation that it used to be before Obama decided that they wanted to do this whole deal to make it a hegemon in the Middle East.
Yeah, indeed. And well, James Morrow, in terms of the way forward here, there's a lot of uncertainty with the conflict in Gaza. We're expecting a ground operation, urban warfare. We don't know how long it takes. And then obviously with that uncertainty, with that protracted conflict comes all sorts of scenarios where as Israel seeks to root out Hamas, then it creates avenues, opportunities for other regional players potentially to think, okay, they might chime in as well. So obviously that's a massive concern right now in Washington.
Well, I mean, think about the position Israel's in right now. They want to go in and root out Hamas, root and branch. But of course, there's 2.5 million people living in Gaza. How do you manage that? Well, it's going to be very difficult. Obviously, that's going to be an expensive operation and cost a lot of blood and treasure, both Israeli and Palestinian. And of course, Israel in these things historically is always in a fight, a race with world opinion, which of course holds it to a whole different standard and says, oh, no, you can't, you can't go after the people that went after you. And so they're going to have to manage that. And then, of course, the possibility of Hezbollah on their northern front, distracting them in that direction. It's a very tough situation for Israel. They need all the help they can get. But I mean, it's shocking because you look at some of the Democrats in Washington, like Rashida Tlaib, and they're not even condemning what happened with Hamas. So, a lot of issues here, Kieran.
James, talk to you soon.
See you soon, Kieran.